Hi everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Maya Modeling Tools Explained in 2026. So let's see three particular tools. We're going to see the add division, we're going to see the smooth, and we'll see the harden and soften edge option you have in Maya 2026. So to do just that, let's jump into Maya. Now I have two boxes in my scene. Just literally just two boxes, nothing more than that. Now to get the add division button, you go down to your modeling toolkit up here, and all the way down here you see add division. All right, now when I click the object in the object mode and add it and click on add division, you see that basically each face has been subdivided into 4 faces each. All right, so what it does is subdivide each face into 4. All right, this one into 4, this side 2 into 4. Okay, if I repeat this again to show you what it meant, let's turn on display. I'm going to turn on my face IDs, so you see what happens here. So face ID number 1, number 0, number 4 are going to be divided into 4 parts. All right, so if I click on add division, this is what we now have. Now if I click on this again, it will subdivide each particular face all over again. Like face number 9 will be divided in 4, face number 1 here divided in 4, face number 11 in 4, and so on. So if I click on this button again and division, see what happens to the entire box. So I've ended up subdividing this twice. All right, so I can increase the subdivision times here. If I change this value from 1 to 2, I'm adding more subdivision across. All right, now that is just how the add division works. It's just as simple as that. It just subdivides a face into 4. Now if I turn off my polygon ID, let's turn this guy off. The next tool here close to it is the smooth tool, and the smooth works the same way with add division, except that it takes it a step further. It creates a crease around them by smoothing the subdivided faces with respect to their face angle, face normal angle. So if I click on this object and hit on smooth here, if I do this, see that each particular face has been divided into 4, the same way with add division, right? But in this case, a smooth was added after the division process. So that is just how the smooth option works, and it also has its own option here to add more subdivision. Okay, the same way you have it in add division. So if I turn this to 2, I'm subdividing all the faces more into 4 equal parts. All right, except that in this case, like I said, the difference between the add division and the smooth tool is that the add division has no crease. It doesn't smoothing all the faces after subdividing it, but the smooth option does exactly that. Okay, now we wonder how this works behind the scene. Now we also have other options on how to smooth geometries in Maya. So I'm going to turn on 2 different objects here. All right, let's just turn off this one. Let's turn this guy on. Let's just see what's happening here. So if I hide these 2 and let's focus on this. All right, now with respect to this, I have an option here called harden and soften edge, which is the third thing that I wanted to show us in this video. If I come all the way up here, right, if you look at how this mesh is displayed, you see that I could see it's faceted. You could see the individual faces, okay, of our mesh. Okay, now let's say we don't want to add more subdivisions to this, because if I hit on smooth, I'll be adding some subdivisions all over on this, which in this particular case, as simple as this geometry is, it can pass. But if you have a very complex mesh, that it will be costly to add an extra smoothing command or subdivision. If I want to smooth without adding that extra subdivision, so how do we achieve that? So let's undo this. If I come all the way down to mesh display, okay, I have 2 options here: harden, soften edge, and I have the 2 of them combined as one: harden and soften edge. So if I click on harden, basically it does what it does. It hardens every face with respect to their face normal angles. All right, so if I turn off my face normal, just to show you what it does, let's increase the normal size. Beautiful. So let's just say we have this, okay? So harden, we just basically harden each face with respect to their normal angles, okay? So we say this, no smoothing at all. But if I click on this and use the other option called soften edge, okay, you see that there's a bit of smoothing, like a crease around this area of the geometry, because Maya just, in essence, smoothened all these faces by looking at the angle between each face normals, right? So what it means, what it did behind the scene is, if I turn this off, for instance, let's just show you how that works to harden, all right? And I come down to harden and soften edge together. I hit on the option here. You see the angle at which Maya is using this is using to basically smoothen the faces. So what it does in essence or behind the scene is this. Let's look at what we can do in Photoshop. It looks at the face angle. So these are the face normals, okay, like we have here. I've sent this to Photoshop just to demonstrate how this works, all right? So these are the normal of each face, all right? So Maya will just interpolate to see the angular difference between each normal of each face, all right? And if that angular difference is, you check it to a certain value, which is what we have up here, we can change this amount, okay, as we want, but by default, it's set this to 30 degrees, right? So if that value is greater than 30 degrees, if the difference in angle of these two normals is greater than 30 degrees, it won't smooth them at all right? It won't apply a smoothing between the two of them. But if it's less than that, then it will apply a smoothing between those two faces. That's just all it does behind the scenes. So in essence, if you measure the face normal angles between these two adjacent faces here, it is way less than 30 degrees. So Maya basically applies a smoothing to it, right? That is why when you now hit on this, you see that smoothing here. But if that value is above, let's say it's, let's change this to a value lesser than this. I'll go all the way down to 150, to Harden. You see that. Let me just take that down back to, let's say down to 10. All right, apply. You see that we have this hardness here because the crease angle or the angle threshold that it needs is way above 10 degrees, right? So that's just what it means here. So that value is way above 10 degrees. In essence, it doesn't apply smoothing on it. If I turn this to 15 and hit apply, nothing still happens, all right? So if we measure the angle between the two faces, most likely is below 30. So when I apply this, you see that I now have that smoothing happening there. So that's just how that works. So in essence, it's a crease angle. In some other software, this is called the crease angle, all right? Like in Houdini, for instance, we call this a crease angle. So we have other means of applying smoothing without using all of this. Let's turn this back to harden edge, right? I'm going to just turn off or rather leave it that way. Now I have this harden edge turned on. If I go all the way down to my attribute editor and under my smooth mesh option, under the polycube shape tab, smooth mesh, if I turn on mesh smooth mesh preview here, you see that you have a very well smoothened faces around them. So you have a very good smooth around all of this. So what is happening behind the scene is just that Maya, in essence, added a subdivision. So if you choose to display that subdivision behind, you see what it did, okay, behind the scene. So he added a subdivision that we don't just see in the viewport, and it uses that to smoothen those faces. We can increase the level of subdivision that it will add. In that case, we can put this down to 1, to 2, or 1 to 3. So by default, it's set to 3. So this still adds some level of subdivision. The hotkey on our keyboard is 3. We hit 3 on our keyboard, we have that 3 and 1 turns that off, 3 turns that on. Okay, that is just some level of subdivision. And we can tell our render by using V-Ray, for instance, to see this subdivision, or use the subdivision we have in the viewport, use it that way for rendering. So this adds subdivision behind the scene. Okay, but these other ones, this doesn't add any form of subdivision. All right, if you notice the polygon count, the faces I have here is 6 in this case, right? But if we use this, it becomes 96 faces. So that is why if you have a complex geometry and we hit on smooth mesh preview, it gets more heavier because Maya is adding a subdivision behind. Now, one particular application example where the hardening and smoothing edge will really be useful is when we are trying to import models from other software or that DCC tool into Maya. Now, let's say, for instance, I have a model here that was done in Houdini, and I want to bring this back into Maya, for instance, right? So this is just a simple house, and the way I have it in Houdini is I have some of these roof tiles and some of the windows hardened to a certain degree. Right now, that has been exported out as USD. If I bring all of this back into Maya, for instance, I'm going to create a new scene. You turn all of this off, create a new scene, and hold on, let's just hide this guy. If I import that, have file import, I'm going to import that into Maya, for instance, and then house is going to have a house 01 USD. Nope. Now I have the house imported into Maya. Okay. Now you notice that in my other software, basically I have my smoothing done, all right, there, which is not actually translating back into Maya for me. Right. For instance, if I look at this side of the house, this particular wall edge, there's a smoothing applied here that I can actually see the wall edge like I have it here. Okay, so what I'm going to do here in Maya is just simple. And if you also notice the balcony woods, they are just too smooth. They almost look like a cylinder, all right, or like tubes, which is not how I want it to be. So what I'm going to apply here is just simple, which is what we've just learned right now. I'll click on this object and go down to mesh display. Something I had in edge, I'll set this to like 30 degrees, which is the default, and 30 degrees will just work just fine for us. So I'll hit apply. I'll let Maya do its thing, and Maya did. Now if you look at this part, you'll see that now I could see this hardened edge around here. You could also look at the balcony, see the hardened edge you see down here. All right. Then for the roof tiles, it's also translated well for us. So that is a typical example or a typical application where hardening and softening edge will really play a good role in whatever we are doing. So if I turn on the wireframe of shaded, you will see how that works out fine. So that is just all we'll cover for now. 3 things: add division, smooth, and harden and soften edges in Maya. So see you in the next video. Bye for now.